B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comments. It's Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018. The nation continues to wrangle with the issues related to Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court, his clear lack of honesty, and the details that keep dribbling out about Lyin Cryin Brett's drinking problems, his abusive behavior, and now we know about the bar fight that he was involved in. He actually is accused of provoking it in New Haven in 1985. But the Kavanaugh nomination and the controversy has finally produced some satirical music.
Done so well.
My buddy Loose Bruce Kerr.
Parties where we partied, yeah, like hell. We're the Ralph and Boofs assembled with our asses raised on high. The effect of over drinking, who's to tell? Yes, along with our imbibing, with the songs we loved so well. Shall I be wasted? Have another, yes, and more. And we'd top it off with boofing, and we'd Ralph, 'cause we're the best. Best forget what we had done the night before.
Loose Bruce Kerr is a Silicon Valley attorney by day, and he goes into his garage with his guitar, and he produces satire music. And I think the music police are going to let me get away with this one because it's a parody of the Whiffin' Poof song, which was a Yale standard. And my old radio buddy from Chicago, the big Eddie Schwartz, he used to play this song every night on his show, and I never understood why. Eddie didn't go to Yale. However, I will link to Bruce Kerr's version of this in the show file for the podcast, should you like to regale yourself with the full-length version. So the bar fight was revealed after Chad Ludington told the Washington Post on Sunday about an event where, gosh, Brett Kavanaugh was so drunk and violent that he picked a fight in a bar. So we learned that they went to a UB-40 concert. You remember a kind of reggae rock band, Red Red Wine was their biggest hit. The event occurred at Demery's, a small bar off the campus there in New Haven. And Ludington approached a guy who he thought was the lead singer of UB-40. But he was mistaken, and he described the guy as New Haven tough. He said something aggressive like, screw off. And then Kavanaugh, according to Ludington, replied with an expletive and then threw his drink in the guy's face. So Ludington is now telling us that he has made contact with FBI agents in Raleigh, North Carolina, near where he teaches at North Carolina State University. He had to fill out a form, and he is expected to be visiting that office for an interview today. So we do at least know that that part of the investigation is moving forward, and that this eyewitness, a guy who was a classmate of Kavanaugh's, has come forward and said that his testimony doesn't square with the Brett Kavanaugh that he knew. So this occurred September 26, 1985, and it led to an altercation with a star basketball player named Chris Dudley. And Dudley was sought by the police. Now, he's got an attorney who says that Dudley was never arrested, never charged, never set foot in court. Dudley came to some public prominence later because 8 years ago, he was a Republican candidate for governor of Oregon. He did not win. So the account is disputed by Dudley. He says he doesn't remember this the same way, and he is making this more complicated. This could slow down the whirlwind investigation that the FBI has been charged with conducting here. Dudley, reached by phone by the Washington Post, simply said, "I don't know what Ludington is talking about." And this leads Ludington to say, "I'm sad to say my friendship with Chris is over. He's not telling the truth. I think he has been trying to protect Brett like some jock omerta." Omerta is the mafia code of silence. So It is an interesting episode. It shows that Kavanaugh was not honest about his drinking and other issues when he testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee last Thursday. And my old pal Paul Waldman used to work for Media Matters, and he's now a regular columnist and opinion writer at the Washington Post. He writes, just how much dishonesty will it take to disqualify this guy? And he's put together a list of the pile of lies, dissembling, questionable statements, and the most recent relates to the episode that has been alleged by Deborah Ramirez, another Yale classmate, who says that Kavanaugh exposed himself and kind of waved his dick into her face while they were both drunk. And the issue is, when did Kavanaugh know that this was going to surface? And did he take action, directly or indirectly, to try to coach the witnesses and other friends from Yale? And the answer appears to be yes, because there is a trail of text messages to some of the key people who were involved in that incident from Kavanaugh and somebody referred to as Brett's guy. And they were contacted before the story was published to try to line up denials. And this plays into testimony he gave before the Senate Judiciary Committee, because he was asked whether he here's the question. This was actually asked by Judiciary Committee staff. Since you graduated from college, but before the New Yorker article publication on September 23rd, have you ever discussed or heard discussion about the incident matching the description given by Miss Ramirez to the New Yorker? And he answered no. So, that appears to be a flat-out contradiction of the evidence available. And in a court of law, it would be adjudicated, and it would be determined to be a lie. Now, Paul Waldman goes into a whole litany of the other lies. I've linked to his column, and you can read them for yourselves. But he reiterates there was not a single day during Kavanaugh's high school career when it was legal for him to drink in Maryland. And he reiterates that the Devil's Triangle claim of a drinking game is simply not supported by anybody else's use of that term. He closes by saying what we have here are some apparent outright lies, some deceptions, some mischaracterizations, some evasions, and a general picture of someone who decided that giving truthful answers to all these admittedly personal questions would only get him into more trouble. He said there's no doubt that he hasn't been honest or truthful. The senators have to decide whether they care. And what is the standard? And Eon Higgins, writing at The Intercept today, quotes Jeff Flake, the senator from Arizona, who's at the center of all this, and he lives up to his name. Both sides of this dispute consider him a big flake. But this article reads, Kavanaugh is a liar. Kavanaugh lied about whether he'd ever attended a gathering like the one that Dr. Ford described, likely lied about the definition of a devil's triangle, lied about when he learned of allegations made by Deborah Ramirez, among a slew of other falsehoods. But Jeff Flake, who has said that if it's established that Kavanaugh lied, that is disqualifying, suggesting that he would vote against the nomination. But then he rationalizes statements that he has made. For example, quote from Flake, those of us who sat through 30 hours of testimony discounted those claims, referring to those about him lying about receiving Democratic documents that were stolen back in 2002, 2003, when he was managing appointments to courts by the Bush White House. So this is something that the Democrats have carefully documented. And Dianne Feinstein, I'll find it in a moment, issued a tweet today where she clearly takes up that issue. So the bottom line here is what is Flake's standard for Kavanaugh's honesty? And the answer is we don't know. Another big question that I put up on Facebook last night and got some interesting answers is, I wrote, okay, so Trump authorized the FBI to investigate any angle for a week. Who gets the report? And this is something that is not described in any public coverage or commentary about this deal that was struck after Flake voted for Kavanaugh, but then said he wanted a week for the FBI to investigate this. So with Mitch McConnell saying that he is hell-bent to stage a floor vote on the Kavanaugh confirmation this Friday, we don't know what happens in the next few days. We don't know whether the FBI is providing interim reports as its investigation proceeds. Will it roll them all up into one big file? And who do they hand it off to? The White House counsel? The Senate leaders of both parties? Will it be available to all 100 senators to review before they vote on his confirmation? Will it be made public? Nobody knows. I have never seen such a murky, undefined process and a failure by the Democrats to force definitions on these issues. Now, I do support some of the debate points, the talking points being offered by Democrats in the early rounds of the floor debate about the Kavanaugh nomination. And as I pointed out, my first reaction to his dramatic hissy fit that he threw on Thursday afternoon was that he demonstrated that he does not have the temperament to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. And Chuck Schumer, who apparently said this without a television camera in front of him, said the issues of credibility and temperament are not something that happened 30 years ago. They're about Judge Kavanaugh today and how he is as a 53-year-old. I think there are serious questions about both his credibility and his temperament that may, to some senators, be more important than the activities that occurred in high school. Now, I think the high school activities relate directly to whether he's being honest, and his temperament in responding to the allegations is, I think, quite a signal. The chief counsel for the Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative advocacy group, said, "This is another part of their moving the goalposts, which is happening at the speed of light at this point." And by the way, somebody posted on my Facebook page some of the ravings of Michael Savage, this far-right nut who has a syndicated radio show based here in San Francisco. And Savage claims that Christine Blasey Ford's father is a longtime CIA agent and that she herself was the CIA's manager of interns on the Stanford University campus. I haven't seen a shred of confirmation for either of those claims, but I want you to know that the right wing is busy, and you may not pay attention to Rush Limbaugh or watch Fox News or pay attention to idiots like Michael Savage, but they are having a field day here, attacking Blasey Ford, just denouncing all of these women as creatures of a sweeping plot by the Democrats to deny this great man his seat on the court that he is so entitled to, and it continues from there. Lawrence Tribe, the respected Harvard law professor of law, wrote a piece that's published in the New York Times today. I've linked to it in the show file for your easy access. He writes his intemperate personal attacks on members of the Senate committee and his partisan tirades against what he derided as a conspiracy of liberal political enemies guilty of a calculated and orchestrated political hit do more than simply display a strikingly injudicious temperament. They disqualify him from participating in a wide range of cases that may come before the Supreme Court, cases involving individuals or groups that Kavanaugh has now singled out under oath and in front of the entire nation as implacable adversaries. Tribe says that he co-authored a recent Brookings report concluding that conflicts of interest and the appearance of such conflicts would be pervasive in cases arising from the special counsel's inquiry into Russian meddling in the 2016 elections. But we know, Professor Tribe, that recusal by a Supreme Court justice is essentially voluntary. And Clarence Thomas, who was supported by the Citizens United group when he was the subject of a disputed confirmation process, he later voted in the affirmative on the Citizens United case. It declared corporate personhood and allowed unlimited corporate contributions to candidate campaigns. So I take Professor Tribe's point quite seriously, but I also know the reality of practice on the Supreme Court. Now, what the right wing is stoking is this idea that Kavanaugh is a victim, that white males have just had it up to here with all this affirmative action, all of this feminism, and that it's time to push back. And we know that Trump supported Roy Moore even after he was accused of sexual misconduct with teenage girls. We know about his own denial of claims of sexual assault by more than a dozen women. But Frank Luntz, who is the pollster for the Republicans, and I've never seen a guy who can go lower than Luntz, he said there's a feeling of being guilty until proven innocent. In this era of Me Too, there are a lot of men and some women who believe that justice no longer exists in America, that the accusation is enough to destroy someone's career and someone's life. And that wasn't manifesting itself politically until late last week. Now, I would submit that Al Franken is the poster child of a guy who was sent packing without due process. And Al Franken wasn't up for confirmation. Al Franken wasn't accused of lying under oath or of a true attempted sexual assault. So the polling right now, according to Quinnipiac, shows that women oppose the Kavanaugh nomination 55-37, men support it 49-40, and 48% of American voters most believe Professor Ford, while 41% believe Judge Kavanaugh. And let's see, here's a quote from Rebecca Traitzer. It's not just that white men are allowed to be angry and women are not. It's that white men's anger can be used to their benefit. She wrote a book called Good and Mad, The Revolutionary Power of Women's Anger. She continued, we reflexively understand the anger of white men, especially when used to convey how unfairly they've been treated, as righteous and correct. And unfortunately, she is righteously correct about that. My pal Joe Laria, editor-in-chief now at Consortium News, wrote his recap of the Kavanaugh case, and he makes some interesting points, and I've linked to it so you can read it conveniently. But what is most eyebrow-raising about Laria's piece is that he describes his own encounter as an altar boy when a Catholic priest fed him sacramental wine and then massaged his shoulders and swooped down to kiss me on the lips and attempted to unzip my trousers. Now, he uses this to explain that if you ask me how old I was, I can't remember. I may have been 8 or 9 or 10. I don't remember what season it was. I can't remember just most of the other details. But I remember exactly what was done to me in the name of the person who did it, and that was more than 50 years ago. He also quotes Francis X. Boyle, the radical international law professor at the University of Illinois. Contrary to the mantra that the Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee have it in for Kavanaugh, they've largely let him off the hook on a number of critical issues, instead favoring theatrics. While there's substantial attention being paid to the serious charges of sexual assault by Kavanaugh, there's been very little note that he is a putative war criminal. Specifically, recently released documents show that while Kavanaugh worked for the Bush administration, one of the people he attempted to put on the judiciary was John Yoo, who authored many of the justifications for torture that came out of the Bush administration. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Great people like Carl Howard, Anna Gordonier, Mona Kobus, and I want to thank CB. CB got in touch with me because his annual subscription was about to renew, and he's tight on cash right now, and asked me to cancel it. And instead, I said, CB, we've got some generous supporters here who fund scholarships for people in a situation like yours. And so I have used that scholarship money to renew CB's subscription for another year. And if you find yourself in that situation, don't be shy about getting in touch with your humble host. And that's my hook to invite you to become a subscriber. Come on over to peterbcollins.com, click on menu, then click on Become a Subscriber. When you get to the sign-up page, Well, you can choose $5, $10, $20 a month, the $50 annual subscription. And don't forget, with a new annual subscription and a mailing address in the continental U.S., you earn the bonus gift, a copy of John Dist's brand new CD called American University. Oh, and I have one more item here about the poor white males who are afraid these days. And Trump was feeding that today, saying he thinks that men aren't safe in America anymore. Well, I don't know who Laura Loomer is, but she's got a good sense of humor. And on Facebook, she posted, if you have a son, make sure you buy him a notepad, a body camera, and a recording device. Get him a battery pack, too, so he can always protect himself with video evidence of every single encounter he has with a woman. Men aren't safe in America anymore. There is a war on men. Can you feel it? Bill McKibben has an op-ed in The Guardian today, and he makes some excellent points. He said, while we've been distracted by the Kavanaugh drama, that Trump has been busy. The administration provided the rationale for scrapping Obama's automobile mileage standards because Trump's crew now officially expects the planet to warm by 4 degrees centigrade. In the environmental impact statement, they say it wouldn't make much difference to the destruction of the planet if we all keep driving SUVs. And McKibben notes that were the world to actually warm to 4 centigrade higher, it would be a literal hell, unable to maintain civilizations as we have known them. But now that is our policy, it apparently rules out any of the actions that might in fact limit that warming. He also notes, and this is kind of off topic for Bill McKibben, reporters discovered that the administration has set up what can only be called a concentration camp near the Mexican border for detained migrant children, spiriting them under cover of darkness from the foster homes and small shelters across the nation where they had been staying. It is a tent city in Tornillo, Texas, where in June the average high is 96 degrees. And where one climate data source succinctly puts it, there is virtually no rainfall during the year. And he compares that with the climate problems in Central America, that Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras are now in the grips of another unprecedented drought, and this is driving migration northward. So McKibben makes a number of good points here. I have linked to it, so feel free to click through and read it for yourself if you have the opportunity. One of the many laws that Governor Jerry Brown in California signed into law before the deadline midnight Sunday is one that requires every publicly traded company based in California to have at least one woman on the board of directors, and it must increase to as many as 3 by the year 2021. Now, I have to say I was buffaloed by this. I said, well, this is a great step forward. It's not going to harm any corporation to require them to add a female director because they can expand the board by as many seats as they want. But I want to credit Andrew Ross Sorkin, writing in the New York Times today. He does point out that the law could be unconstitutional. It might fly in the face of Supreme Court rulings about quotas and affirmative action. So it legally may be a little too late in that respect. And Jerry Brown himself, in signing it, said, there have been numerous objections, serious legal concerns have been raised. I don't minimize the potential flaws that indeed may prove fatal to its ultimate implementation. But he says the recent events in Washington make it crystal clear that many are not getting the message. Now, he's a little inconsistent on this stuff. He signed the net neutrality bill knowing that the Sessions Justice Department would file a lawsuit against it right away. But he declined to sign a law that would have state-legalized injection centers to deal with the heroin and opioid crisis because he said that it would likely be overturned by federal legal action. Come on, Jerry. One or the other. Go ahead, take that risk. Stick your neck out. Let the feds prove that these are unconstitutional actions. He also gave the same excuse when he vetoed the measure that was a workaround of the state tax deduction caps that were imposed by the Trump tax bill last December. Well, America's number one oligarch, Jeff Bezos, has decided that he is rich enough that he can share the wealth. And today he announced that he is raising the minimum wage for everybody who works for Amazon, including the people at Whole Paycheck who can't afford to buy that organic produce that they sell. Now, this is a great leap forward. Amazon has also said it will lobby Washington to raise the federal minimum wage, and he was prodded to do this by Bernie Sanders, who lit a fire under Amazon and Disney for the incredible low wages that they pay. So, this is good news. But, of course, Amazon is busy with this ugly competition that they've created between cities across the country who want to host the second headquarters that is expected to include 50,000 people who are going to get paid $15 an hour. And this race to the bottom is a cruel feature of American politics today, where they're basically seeing who will give up the most in taxes and incentives and free property and 50 years of tax holidays to have the bragging rights for Amazon's second headquarters. Good piece in today's New York Times, penned by Josephine Wolfe, an assistant professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. I encourage you to read it. It's about cybersecurity, and she describes Trump's reckless cybersecurity strategy. Now, one of the things that I feel is off base about the premise of this article is we know that Obama had ratcheted up the offensive cyber warfare operations of the United States to the point where the NSA director, who also runs the Cyber Command, testified before Congress that 80% of his budget is now targeting offensive cyber actions. So, the professor here, Josephine Wolfe, suggests that the Trump administration is going to ramp up offensive cyber operations in a manner that hasn't occurred before, and I frankly am not sure that's the truth. However, she does ding the Trump team for wanting to essentially escalate cyber conflicts and to hit back before they can even figure out where the cyber attack came from. Now, I understand there's been another hack-in at Facebook, and they still do not know the source of the attack. So what should we do? Just be randomly attacking known hackers or hacking nations until we find out who actually did it and which one deserves to be retaliated against? She also says that if the U.S. preemptively attacks their servers and online infrastructure of a foe, it will only provoke greater and more damaging shows of force. And she says there's no evidence that preemptive cyber attacks will serve as effective deterrents to our adversaries in cyberspace. Interesting piece that I found at the Washington Post today. Amber Phillips is a talented reporter, and she reacted to a new report published by Esquire magazine, written by Ryan Lizza, who used to write for The New Yorker. And Ryan Lizza goes tracking into claims by Congressman Devin Nunes, the Republican from California. He's Fresno-based, and he, of course, is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. He's been brutally attacked for the way he has partisanized, is that a word? He has used partisan tactics in running the Intelligence Committee. But this isn't about that. This is about whether or not Devin Nunes is a farmer and whether his family farm is still located in the Fresno area. Well, Ryan Lizza did some digging, and it turns out that the dairy farm operated by his parents was sold in California, and they bought another one in Iowa, in Steve King's congressional district, in 2006. But Devin Nunes still poses as a farmer. And I've linked to this story, which has a link to the Esquire story. You can run all this down for yourselves if you want. But I emailed Amber Phillips this morning after I read it because both Phillips and Ryan Lizza miss an important factor in whether it's significant that Devin Nunes still claims to be a farmer. Because there was a whole legal wrangle about how he's listed on the ballot for the midterm elections. And he claims to be a farmer based on an investment that he has in a winery in Napa County. he no longer owns any agricultural property in Fresno. But he claims on the ballot that he is a farmer. And neither one of these great reporters included that in the coverage about this story. First Lady Melania Trump is on the road. She split from the White House, and she is touring Ghana, Malawi, Kenya, and her final stop is in Egypt. And as the Washington Post points out today, she is going to highlight programs funded by USAID, a slush fund that is often linked to the CIA's covert operations. And this is going on as her husband and his administration have proposed massive cuts to USAID. They're also going to tour an elephant and rhino conservatory in Kenya, right after the Trump administration loosened regulations on trophy hunting and the importation of elephant tusks and other trophies. So the irony, I can't judge. It appears the irony is lost on the First Lady. But maybe she is far more clever than people like me give her credit for. Well, at our house every night, during dinner, I turn off the cable news I've been watching, and Kathy and I talk a little bit, and then when we run out of things to say, we watch Jeopardy. It is our family time together. We love the game. We make fun of Alex. We make fun of the contestants. And now we have another reason to make fun of Alex Trebek, because yesterday he moderated a gubernatorial debate in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And by all accounts, he did a lousy job. He didn't ask very good questions of the candidates. He interjected his own comments with a bad joke about the Catholic Church. Let's see. He joked that the only thing with a lower approval rating than the Pennsylvania legislature was the Catholic Church. That's after the grand jury report on the priests who are sexual offenders. And when he got booed, he lectured the audience, wagging his finger, "Don't go there. I was born and raised in the Catholic Church, and I'm just as ticked off as everybody else is over what has happened." So there are other issues. He seemed to have done his homework about politics in Pennsylvania, but was more intent on demonstrating that than getting the candidates on the record about their differences and similarities. So, Alex, go back to revealing the questions instead of asking them over on Jeopardy. And finally today, I'm this blistering critic of the FBI. I never say anything nice about the gumshoes. Well, in Oregon, in September, we don't have a date. In the town of Williams, the FBI was instructed to raid a property because it was being given up as part of a court settlement, and the guy was not cooperating. So officers found booby traps throughout the property, spike strips, a circular hot tub turned on its side and rigged to roll over anyone who triggered a tripwire. It was like a scene from the movie Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Harrison Ford has to outrun that giant stone boulder that was triggered by a tripwire. And maybe you've seen the recreation of that. I have at Universal Studios. After making it past the hot tub, a bomb squad and FBI agent approached the house and blew up the front door. Inside, they found a wheelchair fitted with a fishing line, shotgun ammunition, and other items, which triggered the explosion that wounded an agent who found a .410 gauge shotgun pellet in his leg. And the guy who created this little fun zone for them, 66-year-old Gregory Rodvelt, who had been released from the Phoenix County Jail, Maricopa County, in order to take care of these things in Oregon. Oh, my. That's my daily news and comment podcast for you today. Thanks for listening. Feel free to share it with absolutely anyone. And unless the music police get in the way, you'll find it on YouTube. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.